Well, I see there's one. Um, I'll give it a minute or so, I guess, to see if anyone shows up. Just figured I'd try this whole live thing one more time. And whoever this one person is, thanks for being here. Um, I don't seem to be getting too many people. So, ah, I figured. Good morning. Thanks for coming to watch, I suppose. At least somebody came. Thanks for watching. I'll give it another few minutes or another few minutes, but about 30 or 45 seconds, I guess, and see if if someone else actually shows up. Well, I guess it's just the one again. Hopefully, these will start to get a little more traffic at some point in the future, but I guess with my timing, I guess it's not good for some folks. Anyhow, first off, the title of the thing had to do mention Stormy Daniels, and I was going to talk about, well, one, how I didn't watch her interview yesterday, and the reasoning behind why I didn't watch it. And the main reason is it doesn't really matter. I don't think. I don't think it really matters who the president slept with 10 years ago. We've had presidents in the past who were just as sleazy. One of my favorite presidents was Bill Clinton. And then of course, we found out that he was very much a sleaze when it came to women and how he dealt with different women over the years. So it's not surprising that people would lose their mind over it, but I don't think it's as important as they're making it out to be. It seems like a lot of people are just mad, especially on the left. They're just mad because the right went after Bill Clinton for his affairs, and now they're just trying. It's just like we can do the same thing. My problem is I always thought the left was better than the right. When it came to thinking and being rational. But I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years that that is not the case. That there are people on the left and right that both just have no ability at all to think for themselves and to realize that sometimes people do screw up, people make mistakes, and it doesn't mean that they're a terrible person all the time. Although you know there's sometimes it does, and Donald Trump has done a lot of things that I think to be very much despicable, and very much not you know completely immoral. But at the same time, I think an affair is something between him and his wife. I don't think the rest of us should really be hearing about it. To be honest with you, I don't even know why she would go out there and why Story Daniels would go on 60 Minutes to have an interview over it. It doesn't seem right. It seems like something that should be kept private and dealt with between the people that had the affair and the spouse that was cheated on. I've been through things like that, and I wouldn't have wanted the whole world to know exactly how things played out and what happened. And so this got to be terrible for Melania Trump, who's she's the innocent one in all this. If you ask me, she was a spouse that was cheated on, and she's basically getting drugged through the mud by some people. A lot of people asking why she's not getting as many questions about it as Hillary Clinton did, and I'm not sure why one would get more questions than the other, but it's a different day and time. It's a different time, and I don't think people are going to ask her that question. But it was almost considered, where at least where I was growing up and everything, that it was considered normal. It seemed like if a man wasn't getting what he wanted at home, they were almost people were like, oh, that's why he did it, or whatever. And a lot of times it was left on the woman as their fault, or the spouse, whichever spouse was cheated on, was the one who was considered the one to be blamed, which is couldn't be any further from the truth. It's necessary. It's generally not a problem with the person that was cheated on. It's a problem with the person that did the cheating. So yeah, Donald Trump did something terrible. It's completely immoral. I can't believe the evangelical folks are supporting him, but they are. Anyhow, I just don't think that it's that big of a deal. I know he paid. Exactly. It's what you would expect from Donald Trump. Exactly. And so it's just par for the course. He's cheated on his other wives. Why wouldn't he cheat on this one? Um, so it's kind of not surprising at all. And this takes me to something that just apparently passed when Trump signed the budget package the other day, back on Friday, to avoid a shutdown. It didn't have anything in it that most people wanted, but he didn't get what he wanted. Democrats didn't get all of what they wanted, and they couldn't even put DACA in it because they couldn't agree. And that will be a video for tomorrow, a discussion over how DACA didn't get put into this last budget. But apparently, tucked into that nice $1.3 trillion deal, which a lot of money a lot of extra money going to the Defense Department, who have already said they don't even know how to spend the money that they have. But they tucked into it a ban on restaurants taking tips from servers. Of course, I don't know if you saw it or not, but last year the Trump administration was proposing allowing restaurant owners to skim tips from certain workers, and basically they could be allowed to take all the tips off the table, and they would decide what to do with it. Congress put into the law that they passed on Friday that they cannot do that. That restaurant owners are not allowed to take any of the tips from the workers. Now, I don't know if that has any effect on the places that pull tips or not, because I know some places, tips are, everything's gathered at the end of the day and then tips are put out equally, which I don't think is reasonable. That's not how it should work. If I tip somebody for doing really good, say I go to a place and I pay $50 for a meal, and I leave them a good tip. I don't want that tip to go to somebody else who was, slacking on the other side of the restaurant. And I've been to places where that's happened. So there's places that do that, and it's not right. I think if you tip somebody, it should go to the person that you put the tip for. And it shouldn't go to the restaurant owner. And Congress has jumped in and said, no, they're not going to allow that to happen. So, yeah, my wife was a server over at a place here in town for a while, and at least they didn't take her tips away or anything. And I'm glad now that servers aren't going to have to deal with that, because it's hard enough to be a waiter or waitress. I know it's hard to deal with me sometimes because I can be picky, and I don't tend to tip unless somebody leaves me gives me good service. But most of the people I come across give me good service. I don't ask for a whole lot, but I can be picky, with how things get done. I even left a tip for somebody one time that spilled an entire Coke all over me, because overall they did good, but dang, it was cold. Now, there's another big news story that came out recently, which I didn't realize it was this big of a deal, but they refer to it as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And they used to think it was about the size of France or whatever. They didn't think it was all that. They thought it was big, but they didn't realize it was as big as a new study points out that it is. Apparently, and this is pretty big. They believe it to be 1.6 million square kilometers in size. They're saying that makes it up to 16 times bigger than previously thought. Previous estimates put it at a lot less than that, a lot smaller than that. And apparently, a lot of this is leftover stuff from from fishing and things like that, as well as other floating debris. A lot of it, apparently, some 20% is believed to have come from the tsunami that hit Japan, and I believe it was 2011, the Fukushima disaster and all that stuff. But apparently, it's made up of roughly 80,000 metric tons of garbage. And if you ask me, that is a lot of garbage. We should really stop putting all this garbage and trash into the oceans. And of course, a lot of it too, it's kind of incidental. I think you have people out there fishing with nets and stuff, and they lose a net, and it ends up floating off, and they can't get it. It's going to hit. It's going to snag on something, and it's going to end up floating around for years until it, I guess, runs into this this giant patch of garbage. And so it's kind of sad, but we need to do something. I don't know what they can do. I don't know what we could do to end up making that small. But it can't be doing the wildlife and the marine life any good, to be having to live around all that kind of garbage. So hopefully they figure out something to do to make it smaller and not deal with such a mess. But 1.6 million square kilometers. They're saying that makes it about double the size of the state of Texas. And living in Texas, it's kind of horrifying to know that there's a patch of garbage floating around an ocean that's bigger than Texas. I mean, if I wanted to leave from where I am and drive to El Paso, it would take me over a day probably. Probably at least take me 12 to 24 hours to get from one side, because I'm over here almost by the, not too far from the Louisiana border, all the way over to El Paso would take me at least a day. At least going the speed limit and not trying to wreck my car, I suppose. But that's a lot of garbage. Double the size of Texas. I think you're right. That's probably about the only way we could deal with it. I have read in the past, though, that there are different things that scientists have been working on that would actually help possibly use some kind of plastic eating organism of some sort, at least eat down the plastic portions of the garbage. That would at least alleviate some of it. But I think the Navy's probably the one that would have to deal with it, because I don't see any individual or company that's going to be able to just easily clear it. But it's insane to see how much garbage is actually sitting in our oceans. And, like I said, it can't be good for the environment, or for the fish and other, marine mammals and stuff like that may live in the areas that this thing covers. And it just apparently floats around. I'm just in shock that it would be that big. I'd heard it was big, but I'd never heard that it was that big. And lastly, this will be a little bit shorter than yesterday's, I'm guessing, depending on how long this next one goes. Rick Santorum. Some may not remember Rick Santorum, but I remember watching Rachel Maddow make fun of this guy because of something that got put on Google about what Santorum was. And it's kind of hilarious and also very disgusting at the same time. If you don't know, Google it. Look in the Urban Dictionary page for it. It's kind of funny. And she railed on him for weeks on that. And so I thought it was hilarious. I still haven't forgot it. Every time I see the guy, it's the first thing I think of. But Rick Santorum yesterday decided that he had something to say about the people that were the kids that protested, at the March for Our Lives on Saturday, basically insinuating that they shouldn't be protesting. They should be learning how to have do CPR, in case a shooting happens. He was quickly, kind of attacked by doctors and other medical personnel that were like, CPR is not going to, CPR doesn't remove bullets, from a body. If you've already been shot dead, you're dead. There's no way that learning CPR helps stop gun violence. Clearly, CPR is a good idea in case there's someone still alive and you're trying to help save somebody. But at the same time, most people aren't going to have time to sit there and give CPR to their buddy next to them when they're being shot at. Most people are going to scatter. So CPR, great. It's a great thing. But to sit there and tell these kids that they shouldn't be worried about, taking care of themselves or worried about changing the gun laws here in America to make their schools safer it's just ludicrous. It doesn't make any sense to sit here and tell kids that that they shouldn't care. And it's just a common rhetoric from the people that have been bought off by the NRA and other groups and stuff, and the Second Amendment, activists and things like that, that are so scared that people are going to lose their guns, which isn't what they're asking for. The kids aren't asking for your guns to be confiscated. They're not asking for any of that. And they're most of them just want common sense gun regulations put in place. Yes, would they like to see AR-15s and other assault type weapons banned from being manufactured in the country? Yes. Could that help? I don't know. It didn't seem, you go and look back at the data, and the numbers didn't really change, pre-1994 to after 1994. We still had Columbine and other shootings like that didn't happen as often as they do now. But there's a huge uptick since the last ban died out in 2004. When the assault weapons ban died, when they let it pass, all of a sudden there was an uptick in shootings, and most of the shootings since then have used AR-15s. And so I'm not sure what we could do necessarily. I don't know if a ban would help. I think maybe a moratorium, at least on manufacturing these things and selling them, would be helpful to at least figure it out. It goes back to something that Donald Trump said when he first took office, when he wanted to ban all the Muslims from coming in the country. And he said he wanted to ban Muslims entering the country until he could figure out what the hell is going on. So maybe we should put a moratorium on assault weapon sales until we figure out what the hell is going on in our schools and figure out how to protect our kids, kids from these shootings. And so for people like Rick Santorum and others to sit there and just discount what these kids are doing, tell them that they shouldn't be worrying themselves with this, it's just ludicrous. It's not right. These kids are actually doing something that I know my generation didn't do a whole lot of. There are lots of things that, people did that, we could have done something about. There was a shooting in I think it was Pearl, Mississippi, Jonesboro, Arkansas, Columbine. My generation didn't go out and march and say, hey, we're not doing this anymore. And the fact is, we should have said something. I believe I was a senior in high school when Columbine happened. And as a senior at the time, I should have said something. I should have spoke up. But we didn't. None of us. I didn't hear anybody my age saying, hey, we should take care of this. We're like, oh, the adults will take care of this. It's what the adults are for. And at the end of the day, I think, as Emma Gonzalez said, you have to fight for your life before it's somebody else's job to do so. Anyhow, Southside GA, once again, thank you for watching. I'm glad that you're here again. I'm not sure exactly when I'll do the next live one. It'll probably start just being a Sunday thing. We'll see what happens. Anyhow, thank you for watching, and have a great day. And I have another video that'll go up later on this afternoon, I believe. And so you have a great day, and thanks for watching.